Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be talking to Reverend Wendy Hamilton about how the country moves forward. Let me see if I can find Wendy. Don't see her yet. We'll try that again in just a sec. Hmm. I'm waiting to see if I can find Wendy, but you've probably gathered that. I don't see her. Oh, look. Right, I will give it a little bit of time. Um, it's been a very devastating and heartbreaking time for all of us here in the country. I attended a vigil for George Floyd a little bit earlier this week, over the weekend, and that was very touching and sad. Uh, but it was touching to see how many people came out. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people. It was a candlelight vigil, so it was at night. I was considering bringing my boys, but I don't think they're old enough to understand really what's happening, and I was concerned that they would end up not being very silent because it's it's hard to sometimes for a 4 and 7 year old to remain silent in that sort of setting, and I thought that would, and I think looking at it, I believe I was correct because I don't think they would have understood the gravity of the setting. And um, yeah, let me see if I can find. So still waiting on Wendy. There's some questions I just saw, so that's interesting. Maybe I'll take some questions while we wait on Wendy. Um, hmm, that's weird. Let's see if this works. Hey, it worked. Wendy, how are
Hi,
you?
I'm well, Andrew. Sorry about that. I just got a little bit technically challenged, but I think we got it all figured out.
I've been there. It's not always easy to get into one of these things. I've been like knocking on the door with a couple of people. So where are you physically, Wendy?
So physically, I'm at home in Washington, D.C.
And how is it there?
It uh, it is well. Can you see me on camera?
Yeah, I see you and
Okay,
hear you just fine.
okay. One. So the weather and all of that is good physically in terms of the heat and warmness, and summer is coming. But as you may well know and have watched on television, it's kind of a burning situation happening here in Washington, D.C. It's I think for the first time in a long time, I have to say, I felt scared. Um, I'm generally the one that's optimistic and the one that's, hey, it's all going to work out and we're going to be fine. And I'm hope, faith, and let's get through this together. And I'm still that. But this time I also felt like I needed to embrace my humanity and say, this is scary. And I actually don't know how this is going to turn out.
No one
And
knows how
yeah,
this is going to turn out. And the crowd outside of the White House that I saw um, was enormous. Like it seemed like it stretched as far as the eye can see. And at least last night, it doesn't seem like there was any violence against those protesters. But I can't help but think that that crowd will just continue to grow.
well, I said, protests, uprisings, what I like to call it, they don't die, they multiply. And so when those crowds and the world watched those crowds be treated in the manner that they were treated a couple of nights ago, there was nothing that was going to stop more people coming out because there's strength in numbers. And no one expected or anticipated that they would have the clash that they wound up having outside the White House the other day. So many people watched that and said, oh no, I'm going down. I got to be there. I've got to go down there. I've got to be a part of what's happening because those are my brothers and my sisters, standing down there fighting for justice, and they need to know that they're not alone. And we are stronger together. I mean, that's just the sensing that I got as I watched it unfold, as I listened here in DC to helicopters circling, near my house. I probably live 5 miles away from the White House, if that. So I was very cognizant of what was happening. Wanted really, Andrew, to go down there myself, but thought to use wisdom because at times it was not safe. The mayor here, Muriel Bowser, was asking us to refrain from, coming out of the house if it wasn't necessary, and ultimately implemented a curfew. So I opted against it, but that's not, because I didn't want to be there. I really felt like, and particularly as someone who is a part of the religious community, in the past, Andrew, churches and religious leaders and Jewish leaders have been on the front lines of movements like this. A lot of the civil rights movements of the past, they started, those formulation meetings started in the basements of churches. And so it is sort of natural for me, as in my personality and in my role, to want to be down there locking arms on the front lines with those who are there. But this one got quite a bit dangerous. And so I opted for wisdom in this one to protect sort of my personal safety.
Yeah, I understand the feeling. I mean, when I attended a vigil, it was peaceful, and like the vast majority of gatherings around the country are peaceful.
Absolutely.
But in your situation, I mean, DC, literally, it had been gassed the night before.
Right.
And it is difficult because we are still grappling with COVID-19, and like that there is a sense, like if you're part of a vulnerable population, or like you live with people who are vulnerable, like you do feel like a sense of responsibility not to go out and protest and then possibly like come back and like infect people in your household. So I mean, these are considerations. But I understand completely the context. To me, we have failed so many Black Americans for so long, so many generations, and there's like a real, to me, like unanimity or near unanimity that what happened to George Floyd before our eyes was just so disgusting and inhuman and dehumanizing that like the human reaction then is to protest, is to cry, is to scream and march and like do everything because like of what we saw, knowing that it's not just him, it's Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Eric Garner and the entire drumbeat of
Right.
Black lives that have been brutally taken away from their families, away from their loved ones in their community, and so that this feels so much bigger And so people who want to be a part of it, I think we all want to do what we like, do everything in our power to make George Floyd's death lead to positive change and give it positive meaning.
You know, Andrew, before I became a pastor, I was a chaplain. And as a chaplain, particularly a hospital chaplain, part of my role was sitting by with families who had been given, terminal illness diagnoses and were preparing for the death of their loved one. I'm saying that to say, I've sat alongside beds when people have transitioned from this life to the next. So I've seen people die. But that George Floyd tape was a lot. It was a lot. I couldn't hardly watch it. And to be honest, Andrew, with so many of these, as we just mentioned, the Tamir Rices and the Philandel Castilles and the Sandra Blands, and, at some point it wears down your psyche. And this particular tape with George, watching not just his life be snuffed out on camera, but even looking into the eyes of the police officer who was doing the said snuffing, if you will, it just did something to my soul, to my spirit, because in that moment, I'm looking like, what's missing here? Where is the disconnect on a level?
You were looking into the eyes of a stone cold killer who was completely callous to the life he was extinguishing.
Right. And it wasn't just me. It was everyone. And, you mentioned that all of this is happening against the backdrop of the pandemic. So we're all still trying to figure out how that's going to play out. I do think, however, that having come through the pandemic and, still going through it, our attentions were drawn to the television. There were more eyes on George Floyd, I think, than maybe even some of the other instances that we've seen, which I think has driven some of the outrage. In addition to how heinous and ridiculous, it was, there were more people paying attention because most of us have been in the house. Most of us have been, watching the news, watching TV, trying to get reports of what's happening. So it was a number of people who saw what was an undeniable murder on camera.
It's a comment. And I couldn't agree with you more that, like, we all, like, everyone, literally everyone saw it. And there's also this backdrop of pain and uncertainty from the pandemic and growing material deprivation and desperation, because you have 40 million plus people out of work. Exactly. You have millions of people not sure where their next grocery money is going to come from. To me, it's been disgusting how out of touch our leaders are, like, about this, where you send out one stimulus payment of $1,200 that, like, would last most families like a number of days, maybe weeks. And then that was months ago. And, right. Your bills don't stop, right. Like that. There are things that are fueling the sense of despair that so many people have. Right. Like, on top of the inhumanity of what happened to George Floyd, and the fact that it's not, like, it's just the latest instance of police brutality against Black men and people of color.
It was like the perfect traumatic storm, that was unfolding and is still unfolding before our eyes. And there's so many, as you mentioned, layers to it. And so while, yes, I do believe the George Floyd killing was the catalyst, but it was also in many ways sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, because you can only take so much,
yes.
before you boil over and it just comes out. And excuse us if we don't do it neatly. And I'm sorry if I don't do it conveniently.
No.
And I'm sorry, it's not the way that you thought that I should be responding. Forgive me. But what I need you to understand is that I am about to explode, or I'm in the process of exploding, and I don't have time to think about whether or not it's convenient for you.
In the scheme of things, peaceful protest is like the least one could do, and the fact that people are out in force. As Cornel West said, like, imagine if this happened and no one did react. Like, that would actually be the ultimate tragedy. And
Yes.
so and when Cornel West, he put it so powerfully, he said, like, we're just witnessing decades of American failure, of like the failure of the capitalist economy to give people decent lives, the failure of our legal system to protect the rights of people of color, the failure of the nation state to be truly generative, and the failure of our culture to give people real meaning and purpose and spiritual nourishment and fulfillment. That, like, we live in such a marketplace where everyone can be bought and sold. Everything's about the money. At this point, all content is just like bits and bytes where you think, like, oh, that piece of art was uplifting. Like, maybe it'll get a lot of likes or something along those lines. Like we've just been reduced. And this set of protest is such like a, to me, it's like a cry of humanity. And the question is whether we can use this as like a catalyst towards positive movement. I'm optimistic that we will, because we don't have a choice.
Right.
Though I completely understand that people that are at this point just ready to say fuck it, or like, I don't believe in our institutions' ability to reform or repair themselves, that like no one actually cares about me and mine. And what I wrote was, if you have decades of experience in a particular direction, it's very hard to argue with that. Like, if we've been failing you systematically for decades, and then we say, oh, like, well, now this time we'll get it right. It's like, well, like, why would I believe you? Like, there's no reason I should believe you.
Right. You don't have any receipts or any track record that shows that I, should trust you in this instance. And so for me, that's sort of what I'm wrestling with. And I know many, in the Black community are wrestling with now. Like, we've been doing this. And we've heard all of the promises, and we've been told what the follow-up is going to be. And we've heard the words, but it hasn't been matched with action. So, many in the Black community have felt like we're on our own. We're going to have to solve it, ourselves. And it's not something that can be, in my opinion, or should be solved simply by one community. Because as we've seen, these injustices, racial injustice, economic injustice, it impacts us all.
It certainly can't be like solely solved by the Black community, given that like it's been the Black community that's getting victimized in many of these instances. Like, it's impossible just to say, well, this needs to be everybody. And right now, to me, I mean, the thing that we're all focused on is, how do we protect communities of color from systematic racism and police brutality? And that's something that, I've been digging into that set of issues and possible solutions. For frankly, like, years now, because like I was looking at this when I was running for president, as you know, Wendy, and we met when I was running, and you were an awesome champion for us in South Carolina and everywhere. So thank you. So I'm sure that there is a lot we can do, because like the problem is just so severe. When I tried to figure out how many people get shot by police in a given year, no one really knows, because the data is not reported. And if you do fire a bad cop, that police officer can go to another town or state or county and get rehired, because there's no like national registry of bad cops or people who've had complaints against them or been fired for malfeasance or brutality. And it's bad. Like, it's like, this is like, I'm a numbers guy. It's bad when communities are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on payouts to victims of police brutality, which they are doing, over $1 billion nationwide, because you know that for the average victim of police brutality, like, what are the odds that they're going to be able to successfully sue? Pretty low. So if you see
Very
$1
low.
billion in payouts, you know that, like, the number of people that have cause to sue is like a multiple of that. And
Right.
that $1 billion I'm talking about, that's direct payouts. That's not even litigation. Like, it's not lawyers' fees.
Right.
That's not
Or,
insurance.
you
So,
know,
so as a country, we are spending billions of dollars cleaning up after and paying for the wrongs of bad cops who are killing an indeterminate number of Americans every year.
every single year. And they're just, rather than being, reprimanded or having, their jobs taken or actual, legal consequences, they're just, as you mentioned, reassigned. And sometimes, in certain communities, they may be moved from the city police to the county police. So you know what I'm saying? You
Yeah, it's
may
just someone
encounter.
else's problem. Like, some police person's like,
Right.
hey, like, this will be, and uh, so there are things that can be done that we have to do. Um, like the plan I suggested was, well, I looked into it. The Department of Justice has some jurisdiction over bad police officers since 1994, but that power is very narrowly used, and it's only been used once in the last 3 years, as an example, and we know
Wow.
very bad things have been happening.
Wow.
And so I suggested a new like division of the Department of Justice that's expressly dedicated to police misconduct, and
Right.
name it after George Floyd, and then you'd have a chance to actually have, because here's the problem. If you're the district attorney, you work with law enforcement every day. So can you really just turn around and, like, try and nail, like, a bad cop when you literally are, like, working with that cop or their colleagues, like, every day?
Yeah,
Like,
that you just
it's
have, and your son, plays on the same baseball team with them,
yeah,
perhaps.
it's nearly impossible, and it's
Right.
also very, very difficult for the mayor because they're in a similar boat. Like, law enforcement, it's like one of the most powerful groups in the community. Like, if you're the mayor, then they're like your like, most powerful constituent. So are you really going to fight them over the bad cop? So you need someone who's outside of the community. And the person who told me this was like a Black Lives Matter leader. They looked
Right.
and said, look, like, these communities need someone who will come in from the outside that just cares about what the cop did, as opposed to all of the relationships the cop has.
Well, you know what I'd like to see, though, because all of those are important. And I did see, of course, your article, and, am loving, Andrew, your voice in this, and just the solutions that you're offering, that you're putting out there. You are the math guy, you are the solutions guy. You had receipts before you even got on the campaign trail. That's why I follow you. But I'm if you're the head guy, I'm the heart woman. And
Yes.
I I I am, see, a bad cop is, there's something internally bad that shows up on the outside. Like, I want to see some better training before they actually become a cop. Like, where are the cultural competency and mental health evaluation and things, resources made available at the police academy level? Like, I need to know where your head and your heart is and what you understand. How do you feel about humanity? Because you have to be able to dehumanize someone to be able to kill them in cold blood on a camera. So there's something, to me, that's going on in you that also needs to be addressed, in addition to all of these other sort of policy changes and accountability organizations that are put into place. We've got to find out what's going on with people. And part of it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, that, our society, we've sort of been made into not who we are and what we have to offer, but what we can produce.
Yeah, we're all
Um,
input into this machine. Um,
that's it.
and, so there are 18,000 police departments around the country. And so you can imagine that like the training and vetting is like incredibly uneven and different depending upon if you're joining the Chicago PD versus like some small town
Des
police
Moines.
department with I mean heck, it's much smaller than Des Moines. We're talking about like like literally like some like town with one traffic light, and there's like a like a tiny police department that covers like that county. So that the standards are all over the map.
Right.
And I agree with you that some kind of national training could be very positive, uh, because like the training standards right now are everywhere, and the use of force rules are different depending upon where you are.
Right. And so who are the voices? How then do we begin to speak to those issues and begin to see our local leaders and mayors, as you talked about, begin to screen a little more deeply? I don't need to know if you can shoot a gun. I need to know if you can de-escalate a situation. That's what I need to know.
Yeah, and one of the things that's coming up that that I find really interesting is like there are a number of interventions in life that you wouldn't necessarily want someone to come with a gun to, where people are imagining that if you had like an army of mental health professionals or counselors or social workers on call,
Yes.
that so and one of the facts that was presented was that one out of every four victims of a police shooting was mentally ill. And
Right.
so when you have someone who's mentally ill, they might not be responding to police commands for any of a number of reasons. And let's say that you're someone in a community and like you're having a problem with someone. Like I'm imagining a world where you could call someone who is not armed with like a weapon that can kill people. It's
Right.
I've got a situation here,
Yes.
and and to me like this is probably like a very wide range of situations. Like like if you have like domestic disturbance, or like someone like or like one of the things that's been killing people, it's like this broke my heart. It's like there's a neighbor who's like, hey, I think there's something amiss with my like neighbor's house. It's like I think there's something wrong.
Right.
And then the police officer shows up and then like kills the owner of the house because like they're and this happened like relatively recently. It's like imagine if you could call for help and someone shows up that's there to help, but they
That's
don't have lethal weapons. They're like a
yeah.
social worker and not a cop. Or you have like people who are trained as police officers, but that they don't have weapons. It's like 912. It's like, look, like I want someone to come and help, but
Right.
like I don't need you to come kill anyone. Like or like there's something going on at my neighbor's house, but I don't want you to like come kill. Like like it's just I need someone to check it out.
Well, the 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 militarization of the police department is a whole nother conversation to have too, Andrew. But I'm thinking of a couple of instances where I saw online a picture of a house and there was a sign out front, and basically there was a message on it saying, this is my house and my cousin lives here. He's autistic. He's a Black man. So please, before you enter, know that loud noises, and she had to go like through this whole explanation so that there wouldn't be a misunderstanding and somehow her cousin gets shot for for having a reaction that was related to his condition, as opposed to him being threatening in some way simply because he was a man of color and not assuming that he wasn't following directions. That's where we've come to.
Yeah, I saw that sign and like it seemed very it was heartbreaking that you need the sign, but also very smart. It's like if I had someone who wasn't going to respond to police commands, and you'd want to notify folks. You mentioned the demilitarization of police departments. Like that's a must. You literally have a
We
program that where the Pentagon just gives its surplus weapons to police departments. Oh, wait, give is wrong. Sell. It's like a money
Right.
making
Right.
operation, and so you wind up with the police departments that have tanks and uh, grenade launchers, and it ends up if you're like a police department with those armaments, then you wind up acting like the military, and
Right.
you start regarding people that you're supposed to be serving and protecting as like the enemy force that occasionally you need to like smash down the front of their house.
Right.
And the reason you think that is because you literally have a vehicle that's designed to smash down the front of the house, like, you know, in your department.
Right. So you feel like, well, since we brought it out, we might as well use it. You know, I don't understand that, and it even just the perception that it creates is not one of I'm here to protect or serve you. I'm here to mow you down, and if you
Yeah.
don't get out of my way, I'm going to hit you and the people behind you. And so, yeah, again, for me, that also speaks to something going on inside of them, because I feel like, you know, to take another life, I feel like you are in some ways disconnected from your own humanity. Like you have to shut some part of yourself down to be able to take the life of someone else and justify and process it somewhere in your mind that, well, it needed to happen or it needed to be done. And I'm not convinced that that's the case.
Well, certainly having these weapons of war in your precinct like ends up fueling that mindset, that inhumanity. And Barack Obama discontinued that Pentagon um, program, and then unsurprisingly, President Trump renewed it. So for the last several years, it's been um, regular practice for the Pentagon to sell surplus military equipment to
Right.
to some of our 18,000 police departments. So that would be enormous. I think increased nonviolent intervention resources would be enormous. Some kind of training, like having a national standard, different rules of force where if you have a different rule, apparently it does change behavior. And so you could have national standards for rules of force
Right.
and training. Tracking bad cops is enormous. Having
Mm-hmm.
accountability for bad cops in their union contracts is apparently a major factor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Federal oversight is a big deal, and to me, you know, that Black Lives Matter activist who said, "Look, you need some kind of federal task force in charge of this." To me, it just makes sense because it's very, very hard for a mayor or DA to confront some of the most powerful people in their community. You know, if they do that, they end up paying an enormous price. It's one real drawback of our political system, frankly, that you know your incentives often run parallel to like the powerful people in your community and not for the powerless.
My hope is that whatever we establish and whatever is put in place, that it's actually implemented, and that, you know, there's actual
Amen.
because we're good at coming up with policies. We're good at putting packages and things together in the heat of the moment. But once, you know, the next crisis or something rears its head, you don't see any anymore. And then the accountability piece. You know, we need accountability for the ones who are supposed to be holding accountability, unfortunately. And so I think we need a strong piece of that in place. But we do need to not just talk about it. We have to be about it. And you
Well,
mentioned
that's what these protests are about, Wendy. It's like everyone's just so sick and tired of it.
right,
Everyone's just so sick and tired of being told it's going to change, then it doesn't change.
right.
You know, like you look at around at like the real problems. You have 686,000 police officers in this country,
Mm-hmm.
um, over 18,000 police departments. You know, so like um, we can do certain things, but like the systemic fixes need to be like very, very significant, and there needs to be some accountability. Like the lack of accountability is killing us.
Yes.
And it's like the lack of trust. And I don't just mean in this instance. I mean, like, just uh, in our society, it's like right now there are millions of people who like don't have any certainty, and like literally 80% of Americans are for emergency cash relief at this point. Like
Right.
that's as unanimous as can be in the United States of America, and our legislators, like, can't get it done. At this point, in my opinion, there's like near unanimity that we need to do something about police brutality and racism against people of color. And
Right.
it's like I agree with you that the time for talk is done,
Right.
which is why like people are taking whatever action they can.
Yes.
And there's like this desperation where it's like, well, what can I do? I can march, I can protest, I
Right.
can, I can, like, just let people know that like this needs to change.
Like most of what was sparking even this outrage, of course, it was the killing of George Floyd, but it was the lack of accountability of the officers who were involved. Like, are you
Yes.
like
Well, it just came out that the other three officers have been arrested.
right?
So that's um, move towards justice. I mean,
Right.
that was very welcome news.
That's a good step. I did see that they have changed the charge on the first cop that was arrested, the officer
To
Chauvin.
second degree, yeah.
Yeah, to second degree, and now the other three have been charged. I believe it's with aiding and abetting. And so for some people, we need, racial justice. We need legal justice, but some people, they need emotional justice too. they need to feel like they're being heard. They need to feel like they're being seen. They need to feel like something is happening. And you mentioned the economic insecurity. I'm sure a lot of that was underlying these protests as well. Like you said, we've got 40 million people out of work right now. We got a $1,200 check that for most people was spent before they even got it. And
Yeah.
some people still haven't gotten it. At some point we have to, and we were talking about, there was a lot of back and forth about I call it uprisings, and perhaps there was some looting going on. Yeah, not perhaps. I know that there was, but we have to think more deeply. I'm with you. Make America think harder, right? And some people were still in TVs, but some people were still in Pampers and milk. So let's be clear that there is another, underlying issue that is also not being addressed, that is driving the uprisings and what we're seeing. It was said that, George Floyd had been detained for, I think it was a potential forgery or passing a counterfeit
$20 bill, and that's fueled by poverty and material deprivation.
That's what I'm saying. He shouldn't have died, period. But let's get to the deeper issue of why. I don't know the full story, the background. I don't know the man, God rest his soul. But we don't know what put him in the position to have to even do that. And so poverty is absolutely tied to and needs to be considered and tied into whatever steps and solutions.
100%. I mean, police brutality is fueled by poverty. It's like you have like a poor community, often a community of color in the United States of America. Then you have a police department that starts viewing those people as antagonists. And instead of people I'm serving and protecting, it's like, oh, these are the people that I'm like, like treading on, or like throwing over the roof of my car, like stopping at random. It's like that's the dynamic that gets built up because of systematic poverty that overlaps with racism because of our legacy here in this country.
But you notice that the pandemic in many ways became the great equalizer because not just Black people lost their jobs in this one, and not just Black people were around trying to figure out what their next move was going to be.
Well, I mean, everyone suffered, but better than I do that it hit Black people harder because Black people were more likely to be essential workers, and the fatality rate was much, much higher for Black people because of higher levels of pre-existing conditions. But I agree with you; it got to everyone.
Pre-existing conditions, but it's sort of the inequalities
and poverty. And poverty. It's like if you live in an area that doesn't have a freaking hospital and proper health care.
Exactly.
And if you're a Black person and you got sick, like I guarantee you a lot of people just steered clear of the hospital because they didn't trust it.
It's way deeper than what people see on the surface, and that's what we need. If we're going to see a change, we're going to have people that are courageous enough to talk about this on this level, Andrew. It can't just be window dressing this time. It can't just be, let's put together a Q commission, put a black man ahead, in charge of it, ceremonial, symbolically name a few, black folks to be on it and say, look, here, we put a commission together. Now go
Everyone
on.
feel better. Yeah. Like, I mean, Cornel West said it in such frank fashion. He said, we've tried black faces in high places, and that did not solve the problem.
Yeah.
So now we need to solve the problem. And
right.
Our government is just failed us so many times, so spectacularly, that it's hard to have faith that we can solve some of these problems. And I understand the folks who feel that way because, you have, again, the weight of experience on your side. It's like who am I to like argue against experience? But like that's the spot we're in, where we have to do it for ourselves, our families, our souls. George Floyd, like the millions of people that are crying out in pain right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it. That is the only thing I comfort myself with, Wendy, is that like this has to spur us to real change and more positive action. We need to abolish poverty. We need to demilitarize the police. We need to restore people's trust in the fact that your country loves you and values you no matter the color of your skin, and that if there are law enforcement officers that take your lives, they're going to go to jail for the rest of their life, and we're going to ferret out anybody who would disgrace the office of people that are supposed to like serve and protect you. It's like that restoration of trust is going to be very, very difficult to come by because people have lost any ability to trust. But that's the challenge and obligation ahead of us.
We can build it back. We also, one of the things that has been, a blessing to see is the number of voices such as yours and others, allies who are speaking out, because like I said, we're tired of talking. We've been talking for years. And so, it now is a real opportunity for, folks who believe in justice for all and believe in what this country was founded upon to also stand up and hold their peers accountable and say, I'm not going to let you treat him like that. I'm not going to let you treat her like that, because you treating her like that is you treating me like that. I'm calling for, more empathy. I had said that sympathy says, I'm sorry that happened to you. Empathy says, that could also happen to me.
Or that hurt me. Like, that hurt me the way it hurt you.
That's what empathy says. And so when you can feel it on a level, when you can recognize that, oh, it's not just something that happened to you, it could also happen to me, then it's going to move me on a level to say, I fully can relate now. I can understand and I can feel what you must be feeling in this instance, and therefore I'm going to come alongside you. First of all, I'm not going to dismiss or diminish how you feel. Most people, and Black people in particular, can you just validate us, please? Can you just validate that we feel how we feel? Can we just have our experience without being, reprimanded or told to get over it, or it's not that bad, or that wasn't what he meant, or that wasn't the intention? If we say we're hurt, if we say we're tired, if we say, we need to be helped, just say, okay, or I hear you, or I see you. People need to feel validated before they really open up and trust that you are there to be a friend and an ally and a helper in a situation.
Well, to this, I feel like everyone with an ounce of humanity is on the side of the folks who want to see us get better. It's like if you've gone through this last number of days and somehow think that you know, black people like aren't justified in being devastated, then like, you know, you need to like do some serious like looking in the mirror, soul searching, and say
Yeah.
like this to me transcends like being an ally to black people. This is like, are you a human being that like, you know, that has a sense of your fellow man and woman. You know, it's like your fellow humans. That's what this is to me. This is like this appeal to our humanity.
Right.
And what Cornel West was saying was that like, look, we're getting dehumanized in so many
Yeah.
ways
Yes.
by this um, by racist institutions, and but by like this punishing, dehumanizing economy,
Yes.
by the fact that like our leaders seem completely out of touch and just
Right.
like show up and do like this kind of like emotional penance for the camera, and then just hope that like the problem goes away. You
Right.
know,
Or
that people forget about it, that your attention turns to something
exactly.
else. Like
Exactly.
that there's like this. So that to me is like how do we humanize
Yes.
our country? How do we humanize these
Yes.
police departments? How do we
Yes.
humanize an economy that has just left so many people behind? How do we humanize our government leaders who, and I understand our government leaders now better because I understand what they're surrounded by.
Yeah.
Um, and that stuff will dehumanize you in a hurry
Yeah.
too, you know, and that's why we're in despair. You look up and you're like, you're not actually going to be able to do anything to help me. Like we've like caught on, like the
Right.
illusions are dead or dying. And so when you're left with like the reality, like it, you know, it's um like it's ugly. Like the reality is ugly.
Right.
And then the question is, how do we actually move that reality to resemble like the humanity that we feel?
Well, you know, one thing that I've learned is that I can only humanize you to the degree that I'm connected to my own. And so I think it starts with, you know, people having that hard look in the mirror and that conversation with themselves, an honest conversation about how it is that they feel connected to the rest of the world, not just to your family, not just to your community, but do you feel a sense of connection? You know, going back to police officers and the idea that they protect and serve, and they put forward this idea that we're here to protect and serve the community and we want to be a part of the community. Well, you know what I want you to do? Define community for me and how you see community. You know what I'm saying? You have to have sort of an internal understanding of what humanity is like in order to exercise it toward other people.
Yeah, and you can do that in like khakis and a polo, like at the community center. You don't need to be in like
Yeah,
the tank or the cruiser,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. It doesn't take a lot to, you know, to extend yourself to another, your fellow human being. And we've seen a lot of that. I don't want to, you know, be, you know, remiss about some of the gorgeous acts of humanity that have occurred during this time. And
The police officers marching with the protesters in Newark and other parts of the country.
yeah, bringing snacks and water. You know, when the chaos was happening here in DC the other night, the police officers had actually kind of trapped the protesters on a sort of a one-way street that they couldn't get out of, and were charging at them with tear gas and with the rubber bullets. And one man who lived there on the street, Swan Street, opened up his door literally and said, get in here, because the police were trying to clear the streets because it was curfew time. So this dude is like, just come in here. And he said it was like an escalator, like 70 people were just coming into his house. And he was telling them, go downstairs, go upstairs. The police even charged his, you know, came to his door like he was going to come in. And he told them, no, sir, they're my guests. You know, they're here.
Yeah.
And he let them stay there for 24 hours overnight until the curfew had lifted and they could leave the next morning. And they were just amazed. And he said that was the least that I could do. Those were my fellow human beings. I couldn't believe what was happening. And they said there were only 2 rules that he made in the house that night. One was, stop telling me thank you. And the other was, stop asking me for my Venmo. so so you see that, and that's kind of like, there's hope for humanity.
I truly, I believe that, like, the people are with the protesters. Like we all see that this has gone in a terrible direction for like too many of our fellow human beings, and we understand the anger, the despair, the grief. So I think that if you were to ask people, it's like, how many of us would, I mean, obviously that guy went above and beyond, because like 70 people, like coming in and then just telling the police to go away. I mean, that's beautiful. Or the bus driver in Brooklyn who like refused to bring the people to like the police station.
Yeah.
He was like, you're not gonna commandeer my bus. I'm not gonna like drive these people. Like, I think most of I think most Americans are with the spirit of peaceful protest that's animating the vast majority of the people.
Yeah.
And like the question really is like whether enough people who are in positions to do something about this are able to enact meaningful change in response to the will of the people. And I'm grateful to the folks who are out there protesting and like crying out for all of us, really, because it was like Cornel West said, like, can you imagine if like people weren't on the street? Like, what would that say about us?
Well, I think we have a real shock this time, Andrew. Like I said, I've been through these. I've been on the planet for a minute. And we've been through a lot of these, but this one feels different. This one feels,
it does. I agree.
This one is different. And I think, we really have a real shot here to flip the script and to make the changes that we want to see, because what we've been doing is not sustainable, clearly. And I love that young people are fired up. I love that we're all fired up, too. But I love the energy that, has come as a result of what's been happening. And I feel like that if nothing else, the American people are going to hold our leaders accountable. We're not going to let them just tell us whatever they want and hope that we go back to our lives and not pay attention that what you just told me you were going to do, you did not do. So I'd like to see some youth accountability forces, put in place in some of these places.
Oh yeah, I agree. We have to hold people's feet to the fire and make sure we get it done this time. Wendy, thank you so much for your heart, your compassion, your humanity. I'm glad you're doing well in DC. Stay safe there. And much love to you and yours during this time.
Well, love to you and Evelyn and the boys, and thank you for this opportunity to talk. And you keep speaking, because your voice matters. It's making a difference. People are hearing you. Keep speaking. I'm going to keep speaking, and I'm going to keep praying, which I've been doing a lot of that lately too, because I think that can be effectual, and we're just going to hope that this time it'll be different.
It will be different if we make it so.
Amen.
Yeah, and it's like the last time I saw you, was it on the bus in Iowa? I'm trying to
remember. Yes. It was January. I think was it Dave Chappelle? Was it when Dave was there in Iowa?
Was it Dave? I gotta. Yeah, those were. It's a lot has changed since then. But those were great times, like really beautiful times fighting the fight with you, Wendy, and we're still fighting.
It was my honor to do it, and you changed the game, Andrew. Your campaign and your ideas, and when an idea's time has come, there's nothing that can stop that. And so what has been a blessing to I knew this was a movement when I joined you back in February of 2018. I knew this was even bigger than you. And so to see how your ideas have taken root even after the campaign suspended, and I know there's this big push for people like, tell them to unsuspend, you know, and I get that because we are craving ideas and data and knew we want to move forward in that. And so I'm just so grateful that even with your campaign suspended, your ideas are still moving forward. And so thank you for committing to do that and continuing the fight and the conversation, even without the, without the office.
Well, I'm like you. I'm more committed than ever, more fired up than ever. And certainly you've been a big part of building this movement of ours, and appreciate it so much. Like, you're showing up February 2018 like was awesome. You just like said, like, okay, I get it, like we're here to abolish poverty, like let's get it done.
Let's roll. What we doing, where we going? Let's do it.
And like I'm more hopeful than ever that we're going to be able to get real change across the finish line.
I believe it, and I'm ready. I've been saying the day UBI passes, I'm going to go down on the National Mall here in DC and do the Yang dance. I'm going to dance.
You'll probably be in the office signing it with us. So yeah, like it's going to happen for sure.
It has no choice, because it's the movement for it is growing, it's swelling, it's on the lips and the minds of everybody. Even the $1,200 stimulus, Andrew, that most people got, they were like, thanks, Andrew. Like,
Yeah, more where that came from. Let's go.
Exactly.
Let's get some cash to the people. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Yeah, well,
it was so great seeing you. Love you. Take care of yourself and be safe. Be well. Pray for us all.
Love you. Take care. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.